Welcome to We and Malcolm, heard exclusively on malcolmpresents.com. Heard, it's a streaming platform heard round the world and beyond. And I'm your host, Malcolm Berman. On the top photo is the my co-host, Yana Larson. And Yana, introduce our guest.
I will. And actually, it's not we and Malcolm, it's Malcolm and we.
Malcolm and we. I always,
I know, but just to make that clear.
okay.
All right,
It's Malcolm
let's
and
get
we.
going.
And we is in
Malcolm and
capitals.
we. Yes, yes, yes. Now, may I start?
You may.
Okay. Our guest today is Emily Kaminsky, and she is a young 50-year-old mother of three sons and a community development professional based in the Boston area. Her longstanding interest in cultures, languages, and world history has driven her commitment to social justice. Initially aspiring to be a diplomat, she redirected her career toward anthropology and community economic development, working with organizations that provide financing to entrepreneurs and support low-income communities in the United States. Her personal interests include art, community engagement, and gardening. These passions led her to support permaculture organizations in Africa 8 years ago. More recently, she has focused on refugee-led organizations in East Africa, particularly in the Naki Valley Refugee Settlement, where she assists Go Green and the Naki Valley Young Talent Community. This year, she organized two online art exhibitions with the second auction, raising over $1,000 for art education. Emily also publishes two Substack newsletters, The Creative Convergence and RainMakers and ChangeMakers, the latter documenting the efforts of various African organizations. After completing a 61-day project, she raised $350, which she is distributing to the organizations with the expectation that they will creatively utilize the funds to benefit their communities. And it's a joy to have Emily here. And it has been an effort because she is one busy person. Welcome, Emily.
Thank you. Thanks for
You're
having
welcome,
me.
Emily.
Thank you.
What is your, I'll give it to you. What do you want to talk about? What is your project, what's going on now that you want to expound on?
I think my current passion is is really about elevating the stories of people who are not, you just don't hear about them in mainstream media. They're the people who do all the really difficult work in community development, really grassroots, like person to person change making. And my interest is specifically in the ones that are doing this in East Africa around subjects like climate change, food sustainability, food security, income generation. And so
And
the
human
Rainmaker,
rights.
what's that?
And human rights
And human
with the
rights, yeah.
people coming into the refugee settlements. I did a little research on that, and it's huge.
Yeah, I mean, we all hear about conflicts around the world, and most recently in Africa, we're hearing more about Sudan. But the one that we don't hear about as often is the decades-long multi-staged conflict that is both internal and regional, which is they call it the African World War, which is basically centered in the Democratic Republic of Congo. And it continues to rage mostly in the eastern part alongside the border with Rwanda, Burundi, and Uganda. It's very complicated conflict. Don't ask me to describe it at all. I've watched countless numbers of YouTube videos about why and what's happening, but I do know that it has produced, believe, 1 million people who are refugees from the country itself. 7 million are internally displaced, and I can't recall the number of people who have died as a result, but it's in the millions, and they continue to flee the country. Many of them going to Uganda and Kenya, where there are settlements set up specifically to receive refugees, together with UNHCR. And it's the groups that operate there. Basically, people don't have the wherewithal to do to do much of anything. So they group together and they just try to do the best they can to educate their children, to make sure that everybody's fed, to help teach English. So a lot of the groups that I highlighted on the RainMakers and ChangeMakers Substack over the summer, basically I would do interviews with these groups, with the leaders of the groups, and I'd sort of get their personal story. I'd find out about their organization. I'd, gather video. Sometimes it was a video interview. I'd gather video as well as pictures, and I would draw a portrait of them. And that whole experience brought me really closer to the person specifically that I was interviewing and drawing, because drawing a portrait, it took me 2 hours and I was doing that every single day. So I really got attached to the people I was telling the story about. But
Do you go there or see them in
no, this is
person?
all online this summer. I've
Yeah,
never
it's
been,
really
but
incredible. I
I
mean,
hope
she's
to
made
go.
such good connections with people. One time she even invited me to come to a crocheting session on a Saturday. Well, it was Saturday morning for me, and there were women there. Did you teach them how to crochet
No, they have a
somehow?
master crochet teacher. So a
Oh,
woman who she's probably in her mid 40s. Her name is Nima. She's Congolese, lives in the Naki Valley refugee settlement, and she has been teaching mostly young teen single mothers in the
mhm.
settlement on how to crochet. The main challenge has been materials. It's very
Their
difficult to
yarn.
get.
And I've talked
Um,
about doing it with plastic bags, which,
yeah, yeah,
but you
yeah,
know
yeah,
what, Malcolm, these people, all ages, come to the, they're fleeing from violence and horror and murder, and
Poverty
they,
and
they come with nothing,
yeah,
and they may be, young mothers, pregnant mothers, and here they are giving birth in these refugee camps with nothing, and it's beyond overwhelming, and yet there are people there that are helping, one person, one success, and
yeah.
that's how it starts.
what is this chaos based upon? Is it government? Is it tribal? Is it prejudice? Is it religion? Why are these people oppressed? Why?
Yeah. There's so
What's the
for
conflict about? Yeah,
what
I
I
don't.
can say is after the Rwandan genocide, the I always get the groups mixed up, so I'm not going to attempt
The
it. But one of the
Tutsis,
groups, the one that was committing, I think
Tutsis
they,
and the Hutsis or
yes,
something like
one of
that.
them ended up fleeing over the border into the Congo, where they have continued to be able to operate. And so there's that sort of border regional conflict. There's also there's a very weak government in the Congo that allows basically international conglomerates. It's high, like the resources there, natural resources are amazing, like cobalt, and other minerals and important ingredients for making the lithium batteries in our phones are found in the Congo. So there's also this sort of recognition that it's resource rich. And if you have a weak government there, it's really easy for neighboring countries as well as international companies to sort of pick off the resources. And I read somewhere that one of those mining companies, their entire budget is larger than the budget of the Congo. So when you come to the negotiating table, who's going to win, right? So there's a lot of there have
Of
been
corruption.
stages of internal conflict and regional war. There's a first Congolese war, there's a second one, and then we're sort of in this third era where there are now over 100 militias operating in Congo that just sort of have never been satisfied with the way things sort of were settled in the second war, and some of them are very they're pressing children into service as soldiers, and if you don't serve, you pay the price, often with your life.
Well,
So,
that I've heard because we've had. I forget there was a famous boxer, a fighter here, professional fighter that, as a kid, I forget how old he was a professional soldier. Like I think he was like 8, 9 years old, where they
mm,
gave him a gun and they trained him, and he was taught to kill. But as far as my understanding of what I see as far as in Africa, it's really not based on governments because the governments are, again, not really that powerful. It's based on tribal connections.
I yeah, I don't I can't opine on that. I think it's I've listened to too much that none of it is simplified to just tribal connection. Maybe things fault along those lines, but they're not necessarily started by those.
No,
I think there's so much destabilization, and actually one podcast that I listened to that started to talk about the Congolese conflict was basically they said it all started back in the late 19th century with the Belgian Congo. So you could go all the way back to when it was basically it was an outpost, commercial outpost for Belgium, and it's been
Right,
extracted from ever since.
basically the countries were, from what my understanding, were really formed by Europe. They're
Mm,
really not the borderlines for what is the Congo or the other countries really are almost artificial.
yeah,
It's
yeah.
almost like the states in the United States. Why is over a certain
Mm.
area, is Vermont, and why isn't you go a few feet down, it's New Jersey or
Social
Mm.
Massachusetts.
construct, it's all
Yeah.
man-made cause of problems.
So the organization that I'd like to just talk a little bit about is Naki Valley Young Talent Community in one of those refugee settlements in Uganda that's run by a 22-year-old Congolese refugee who's been living there since he was 10.
Mm.
Many of the youngsters there, young people have been there for several years, if not more. And because there is little to no economic opportunity, um, which is a whole other conversation as to why that is. They do get $5. Not everybody. Some people get $5 a month. There's a whole reason why some people do, some people don't. $5 a month to live on from UNHCR, which isn't nearly enough to cover food or anything else
Mm.
like that. There's no health care. So if you get sick, it's basically pay to play. Whoever has the money lives. So the group that I support, the young talent community, is basically kids who very talented singers, musicians, artists who found each other and basically most of them have families, but they sort of created this new cohort of like, a young family together of artists, like a collective. And they decided since there are tons of street children, tons of orphans who have come with no parents or have lost their parents while being in the settlement, they decided that they would try their best to busy the kids with artistic endeavors, express themselves visually, with art. Oftentimes, when you're traumatized, words don't work or you can't talk about it at all. And so they serve over 80 children, I think from age 5 to 22, basically 7 days a week. And so this summer, I actually taught art classes here in my local community to some children, and I used the money I was paid to help them build. They were in sort of like a makeshift, weird, like barely stable building off the side of another building. And they had an electrical fire. It was just became really clear like nothing was safe. So I used my art teaching funds to help them build an art education center, which they had their grand opening in August. And since then, I've just been trying to do as much as I can to cover food, safety, security, clean water. So getting a rainwater tank, making sure the water is treated so they can drink it, having a security person on site, paying for electricity. Just this past week, we were able to partner with the local village sort of administration because they do have little villages in the settlement to install on their structure community Wi-Fi, which means that all the people in a 50-meter radius can have now access to unlimited Wi-Fi, which is super expensive, and everybody over there has a phone. It's just it's the impact of just that in and of itself. Like we just put it up, and so we're waiting to just sort of like see how
What's that
all of this
called? What's that called? Because
community Wi-Fi.
yeah, how do you, is it like a
That's what they
hotspot
call
or
it. There are cell companies there. There's MTN, there's Airtel. So I'm guessing it's some contractor that has maybe it's a subsidy. I'm not sure what. I mean, we had to pay for it, but they basically put a transmitter inside the building and then a really big antenna on the outside, and it transmits. So there's a monthly cost, but there's an installation fee. And I think it's so impactful for people who already feel isolated and have no connection to the world to have that connection. It provides an opportunity to, and there's, one way out of poverty is who you know. There's a lot of research on, getting out of poverty often comes down to whether you live next to or have made friends with somebody who has resources.
Mhm.
And I want these kids to have as many relationships with the outside world as possible because it only takes one person. Like I'm just one person. I have a job. I have the ability to, send some money over there, but I know there are other people like me out there and I want them to, have the opportunity to develop those relationships and having access to social media actually is for them, it's super, super beneficial. As much as we complain about it here, it's like for
Mhm.
them, it's a lifesaver.
Mhm.
And you know
Yeah.
what I found about a lot of the, because we the world works with, we have what we call We Can, which is stands for We Change Ancient Network. And when I first started, there was this one person that we knew over there. She was in Botswana, which is a relatively wealthy country compared to Uganda and Tanzania and Rwanda, Burundi, and all those areas. Um, but they're all very these volunteers that we have, they're very educated, one's even a doctor, and their passion and commitment to coming back and helping their communities is oh, it's just amazing.
Hmm.
And they do everything they can to help families where father's been murdered, in some sort of violent thing, and kids without mothers, people who are older and don't have wheelchairs. It's just it's just overwhelming. And yet, when you talk with them, they're happy, they're smiling, they're gracious, they're um,
Yeah. Yeah.
I
It's
can't think of the
hard.
word, but I'm sure you feel that same sort of connection with them in
Yeah,
that way.
absolutely.
Well, there's a story which I don't know if it's apropos Africa, but uh, I'm Jewish, and a lot of the people are from New York. And there was a comedian, Sam Levinson, who was a principal, but he became like a stand-up comic, very straight. This is going back to the 50s, and one time he talked about growing up in the Lower East Side and that his seven brothers, sure, brothers and sisters almost share the same bed. And when one would wet the bed, everybody would feel it. But anyway, one time I think it was on Johnny Carson show, and they asked him, "How did it feel to be grown? How did it feel to grow up poor?" And he looked at him and he said, "Who is poor? We didn't know we were poor.
Yeah.
Everybody that this was before the days of television, when you saw
You couldn't
the
compare.
when you saw all the Leave It to Beaver and all these shots with the
Father
woman,
knows best.
Bobby knows best, the woman vacuuming with pearls and a dress on.
Yes, right. In the apron,
Right, they
and
said we didn't know we were poor. Down the block, and they started naming different friends. They were the same as we were.
Mhm.
But anyway, the question I have: do you basically, or the work that you do is basically more concentrated right now in the Congo?
Um, so I support groups that are refugee led. So their nationality is Congolese, but whenever I mention that, they say our identity is refugee. That's what unites us.
Refugee.
So they just happen to be in Uganda. But the RainMakers and ChangeMakers project, when I wrote and did portraits for 61 days, I featured 35 different organizations in Kenya, Malawi, Ghana, Uganda, Ethiopia. There may have been a couple of,
Cameroon,
I don't
Cameroon.
think I did Cameroon.
Yeah.
Oh, okay.
So I have, and I've kept connections with those folks. And so as Yana was saying, while it's not a ton, I use the Substack to raise some money so that I could distribute it equally to those 35 groups. And so while it doesn't sound like a lot, we're sort of having fun with the idea of everybody gets $10 and what can you do with that? How far can $10 go to impact your community? And just this week I've started to distribute that. And it's really amazing how people are like, wow, you have no idea how far this is going to go. Like,
Oh, I know.
I'm going to
Really,
plant 10 trees. I'm going to,
yes.
Right. Yeah, that's
And that's how I mean, there's all there's so much just going on with the regenerative agriculture
hmm,
plants and everything. The mango, reforesting the mangrove
mangrove.
areas. Yeah. And just so much.
yeah.
I didn't notice it so much before, or was it always like that? or how recently did it become so so ingrained and so prevalent to do that? Do you know, Emily?
Ingrained to do regenerative agriculture.
Well, no, just to mean to just really get together and fight the climate crisis by doing the mangrove restoration projects and all that.
Oh, I don't know, except when I've spoken to farmers that are sort of my age and younger, because I did some interviews with some of the permaculturists, and some of them could reach back to having experiences with their grandfather or great grandmother or whoever it was, sort of in the past, who knew the ways of, the people before them, and it got lost for, some generations, probably 60s, 70s, where monoculture um, and not sustainable agriculture, more commercial, industrialized agriculture became the thing. And now you see these young 20, 30 somethings um, who are dealing with the effects and impacts of climate change and lack of food because there's drought, uh, turning to things like syntropic agroforestry, which really is about, like, the motto is like, we plant water. They have these successional agriculture systems and strategies that put so much organic material back into the earth that it captures water, can retain it. One of the groups that I interviewed is called the Kwetu Regenerative Hub in Kitui, Kenya, which is basically a desertified area of Kenya. And they are planting dragon fruit, but they couldn't do the dragon fruit until they planted in the ground cacti, which provided a water reservoir for the
Hmm.
next
Yeah.
group of plants that was going to come later. So I know all these little snippets of stories of what people are doing and what motivated them. And I can't necessarily connect all the dots, but I have a general feel of, like, there's this the regenerative agriculture is coming out of people sort of remembering remembering, oh yeah, my grandmother used to have this
Yeah,
amazing
Sort of like the
garden.
victory gardens and
Yeah,
that
yeah,
what
yeah,
were done
it sounds like
in with the World War II.
it sounds like what they're doing is called survival. They're
Well,
looking
they're
to do things.
thriving though too.
Yeah,
yeah,
Once
yeah, yeah. It's sort of not like when we had the election, we're talking about democracy. This is our last election, and people aren't that concerned about democracy per se, but how am I going to earn a living? What am I going
yeah.
to do? How am I going
how
to
much
feed my
how
family?
much do eggs cost? Which is
Yeah, and this
silly.
sounds, similar to, what you're talking about. People are concerned. They're doing things not because it's, to necessarily fight climate change, but this is what they have to do to survive and get the plant, the crops,
Yes.
food to eat.
Yes. But I specifically interviewed people who were recommended to me. I didn't know all of them originally.
Mhm.
People who were recommended to me who have this different aspect to their being, which is they put we before me, which is a
That,
cultural thing, I think, anyway, because we don't really do that here in the US, like
Mm,
traditional, like,
yeah.
American values.
Well, they think about their families and their communities
Yeah,
and
they are
their
really,
elders.
they're the kind of people who can't not do something about the condition of their community. So it's about their own personal survival, but it's so much more than that. And every single person I asked, I was like, why are you doing this? What motivates you? And they're like, because I this is how I'm built. This is how I'm wired, which is to pay attention to the other people in my community. And not everybody's like that. And so then I
And
would
the,
ask them, who inspired you? Who was the person who impacted you? And then we get sort of a whole network and story about people who've inspired each other by doing something selfless and making change in the community. It was really
did
cool
you have
project.
these discussions or on tape or video or audio?
A lot of them I did via just a WhatsApp video conversation. I did record some of them. Some of the articles that I did actually have a video, so there's snippets of the video interview that I did. But mostly it was me taking the interview that I did orally with them, or getting some information from them via WhatsApp and writing it, and then
Yeah.
asking follow-up questions.
Because what I do and why we started this show basically really is communication to let people know
Yeah,
what's
yeah,
happening. So
yeah.
if there's a way to work with you and put you on as far as audio, well, probably I like it video. I grew up with video, but yeah,
Mm.
to do video, and if people over there have the Zoom. I don't know if they
Sometimes
did
Zoom
it.
is challenging. I was able to get people on Zoom, but generally I had to use WhatsApp video.
No.
Zoom somehow eats up a lot of data
Yeah. Okay.
and gets
Yeah.
Well,
stuck.
I don't know if we could do that with the WhatsApp, but we can figure out
Some
a
of them
way.
can do Zoom. Some
Yeah.
of them can, not all of them, but yeah.
Uh,
Yeah, like if they have internet bundles or whatever,
Well,
that's what
definitely
I,
the artists have no problem now. They have unlimited
yeah,
Wi-Fi. They can
but,
Zoom.
but I will also,
yeah,
but I also wanted to find out whether any of these, the artistic products that they
Mhm.
do, whether it's painting or
Yeah.
yes.
writing, what do you have that organized where you could get people to sell it to different parts of the world?
Yeah, we were able to do an auction alongside in September alongside an art expo, and we were able to sell 20 pieces. I had actually bought some myself to make sure that I could actually figure out the shipping. We have a shipping partner in Uganda.
Mhm.
And so it's a long, arduous process to get those art pieces, which
They
are
were all
on.
intricately rolled up,
Yeah,
and you had a whole ceremony for how you were
that's
opening
right. Yeah. I
it.
now know how to get them shipped out. I know how much it costs to get something to Australia versus the US.
Yeah, wow. Wow, a
So
lot of
now
work.
the really just, I think we're going to do another auction because they've been able to produce more artwork. It's all acrylic on not even canvas. It feels like to me bed sheets, to be honest. But I bought some myself. I've reframed them. So we'll probably do another auction. We're going to build some sort of website for them so that it's easier for people to see the
Yeah.
art that's available
Yeah.
now.
Again, if we could help out there
Yeah.
and put them on our website,
Oh, that
yeah,
would be amazing.
the the
I
the,
have, I have so much material.
the Malcolm and we because
Yeah.
what I see, I subscribe to PBS
Hmm.
and I see all these art pieces and people love them,
Yeah.
coming out of Africa
Yeah.
and they're worth a bloody fortune.
Mm. I'm
You
also
know,
Well,
able to
what?
do prints. It's really easy. Like I've produced some, put some of these, because I have the high res images, I can put them on
Oh,
bags. Yeah,
oh,
I gave
cool.
Antoinette basically a canvas bag with one of this beautiful sort of
Oh
like,
my
yeah,
gosh, that
we
would be
could set up
so
some sort of a
exciting.
business where that we can control of
Well, you know what? We have the
the
Wii
sale and where the
store.
money goes to. We'll
Oh,
talk about that.
okay.
We have a Wii store and it's a little dormant right now because, everything needs attention, but we're working with a couple of universities right now with senior students in engineering, whatever, to help us with all of these things that we just don't have
Oh,
the
wow.
people power. So we could really come up with some
Yeah, I know.
Yeah.
snazzy stuff.
Yeah, I think with because that part of the thing that I'm working with we is because of uh, the communicate. My major is communications,
Hmm.
and right now because of against things like the Zoom and the internet, we could contact the
Yeah.
world.
Yeah. I know. It's
Yeah.
amazing.
And it excites me, and we control it. It's not that
I
nobody else
know.
controls it. You don't have to go to a large corporation. I
Yeah.
do this.
We don't have any big execs to pay for doing nothing.
But you believe her half hour is up. But tell
Yeah.
me, how can people, whether they have donations or want to speak to you, how can they get involved with, contact you or your the
Mhm.
different companies to either to donate or find out more about what you're doing?
Yep. The best place to find me is at thecreativeconvergence.org. That's where I post. I actually have a section of that website is called the Refugee Artist Support Circle. And so you can subscribe to get, I basically am, telling the lives of 15 artists in this refugee camp. And so I put all that material there. You can also upgrade to a paid subscription for, I think it's $8 a month. And I donate everything that people give to me to them to help with their materials and supplies. So the convergence.org
Okay, could
is.
you go through that again for people who,
Okay.
yeah.
So it's www.thecreativeconvergence, convergence.org. And when you go there, you'll see a bunch of different articles that I've written about the young talent community artists in the Nakivale refugee settlement in Uganda. And you can subscribe to receive updates on how things are going with them. You can also upgrade your subscription for $8 a month, and the receipts, basically all the paid subscriptions that I receive, I donate to them to help them purchase more art materials.
Okay, and do me a favor, could you send that info to Ayana so she could
She
post?
has it.
But
I
because
haven't.
okay, but because what we're doing now, all the shows that I'm doing, we're having an addendum to it with all the contacts that people can
Mm,
Yeah.
contact. So they'll go
awesome.
one
See, with our
place.
show, we wanted to be able to feature people like you, Emily, who are
Thank you
doing
so much.
amazing things around the world. You know, there's so much bad news, but there's so much
All
good
right.
news too.
Absolutely.
The
And
bad news
people
now, the
like you
election's
are
over,
what
no
makes
problem.
it happen. So
Yeah,
thank
it
you.
only takes really, I feel like we can, when people get overwhelmed, like I can't do anything to change the world. Like I'm like, why is it that you feel that way? It's totally
Well, they don't
possible.
start,
It just
and
requires opening up your heart and
that's what
Yeah,
I
well, the
love
thing
about We
is
the
with
World is because I can be involved with many different causes and meet so many
yeah,
fascinating people.
right, the problem is you can't really change the world, but you can go one step at a
that's
time.
right. Yeah.
Again,
You can change
Charles,
somebody's world.
yeah,
That's another way to think
Yes.
of it.
Charles Schultz, I don't know, the Peanuts
Hmm.
man, and he has this cartoon which I have actually uh I blew it up and it's a picture on my wall and it's Charlie Brown is sort of like doing, has a house full of junk, and he's trying to do things. And Lucy comes in and says, he said, I don't know what to do next. I have so many things to do. And he starts naming things. And Lucy says, okay, what you do is you do number one. After you do number one, you do number two. And after you do number two, you do number three. The whole thing is if you think of everything that you have to do as one
Mm,
thing, it's overwhelming.
yeah.
But if you realize that you can do it one step at a time, again, the old Confucius trip of 1,000 miles starts with the first step.
Hmm. Yeah, exactly.
Once you take the first step, then you can do the second step, and that's what you're doing.
Or you
Hmm.
can just help Emily.
No, helping Emily is taking that first step
Yeah, right.
Yeah.
and being more
Come
involved.
join me.
And Emily has the contacts.
Yeah.
Yes.
And again, people are interested in that part of the world, which is
Mm.
very, well, I don't know about Europeans. I know Americans are. Because they don't know that much about Africa. Africa is still the dark continent. Oh,
It's
Yeah,
a
some people
beautiful
for sure.
continent
yeah.
with
Anyway,
amazing people.
our buzzer just went off and our time is up.
All right.
Oh,
But thank you very much,
Thank you.
and
This is
hopefully
great.
we'll see you in other endeavors with us.
Thanks.
Yeah. And you're listening to Malcolm and We, heard exclusively on malcolmpresents.com. Tune in next week for another exciting guest or more information about Emily. Bye, guys. By the way, in this country, we have Thanksgiving next Thursday. So happy Thanksgiving.
yes.
Bye.
Bye bye.